he's the #1 challenger and still he don't get a shot at the titles. I'm working with a guy like Sylvester Stallone. He's a perfectionist. There might be people that just don't like you for whatever reason. A lot of people out there don't like me. I deal with that.
Mr. T was tough to work with behind the scenes. The man who made I Pity the Fool famous had some serious problems with Hollywood's biggest names. From explosive fights on the A-Team set to money battles with movie legends, Mr. T never backed down from anyone. Which co-star called him the worst actor ever? And who tried to push him around during filming?
As I tell everybody, as an actor, I try to do two things. I try to entertain and try to get a message across.
Get ready to discover the real conflicts that made Mr. T one of Hollywood's most feared personalities. George Peppard. George Peppard walked onto the A-Team set thinking he was the undisputed star. He had decades of experience, classical training, and major film credits like Breakfast at Tiffany's with Audrey Hepburn. He was sophisticated, polished, and considered himself a serious dramatic actor who was only doing television because he needed the work. When the show started in 1983, Peppard expected to be the clear leader both on screen and off. After all, he played Colonel John Hannibal Smith, the mastermind behind the team's operations. But something unexpected happened that changed everything. Audiences didn't connect with Peppard's smooth leader character the way they went crazy for Mr. T's B.A. Baracus. Kids everywhere started wearing gold chains and mohawks. They repeated Mr. T's catchphrases at school playgrounds. The show's merchandise featured B.A. Baracus more prominently than any other character. Mr. T became the breakout star of the A-Team, and that reality drove Peppard absolutely crazy. The tension started small, but grew into something much bigger. Peppard would make snide comments about Mr. T's acting ability in front of the crew during breaks. He'd roll his eyes during takes when Mr. T delivered his signature lines. He started showing up late to scenes that featured Mr. T prominently, claiming he had scheduling conflicts or other professional commitments that took priority. When contract negotiations came around for the second season, Mr. T's representatives asked for a substantial raise that reflected his popularity with audiences and his value to the show. The network executives agreed without much debate, giving him a salary that was actually higher than what Peppard was making. When Peppard found out about this salary difference, he was absolutely furious. Here was this newcomer with no formal acting training, no drama school background, and no connections in the business making more money than a seasoned professional like himself. Peppard started making his feelings known to anyone who would listen. He gave interviews where he openly questioned Mr. T's acting ability and suggested that the show was becoming too focused on one character at the expense of the ensemble. According to crew members who witnessed the incident, Mr. T had gotten hold of an entertainment magazine that featured extensive quotes from Peppard. In those quotes, Peppard had called Mr. T not a real actor and suggested he was the worst performer on the show who was ruining the quality of the production. Mr. T didn't handle criticism quietly or diplomatically. He marched straight to Peppard's trailer with the magazine in his hand, his face showing the kind of anger that made people step out of his way. What happened next became legendary among everyone working on the show and was talked about for years afterward. Mr. T stood outside Peppard's trailer and read the insulting quotes out loud in his booming voice, making sure everyone on the set could hear exactly what had been said about him. He demanded that Peppard come out of his trailer and explain himself face to face like a man, instead of hiding behind magazine interviews and anonymous complaints to reporters. Peppard refused to come out. He stayed locked inside his trailer while Mr. T called him out in front of the entire cast and crew. It was humiliating for someone of Peppard's stature and experience, but it also showed everyone exactly where the power dynamics stood. Mr. T wasn't going to be pushed around by anyone, no matter how famous they were or how long they'd been in the business. From that day forward, the two men barely spoke to each other unless the cameras were rolling and they had no choice. They would film their scenes together with cold, professional efficiency, hitting their marks and delivering their lines. But the moment the director called cut, they went to opposite sides of the set, like magnets repelling each other. Despite all the behind-the-scenes drama and personal animosity, the A-Team remained a massive success throughout its 5-season run. The show made Mr. T a household name around the world and established him as one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment. But for those who worked on the production, it was also a painful lesson in how professional jealousy and wounded egos can poison even the most successful projects. Sylvester Stallone. The relationship between Mr. T and Sylvester Stallone started with an ironic twist that neither man could have predicted. Years before Rocky III made them both famous, they had an encounter that set the stage for all their future conflicts. Mr. T was working as a bodyguard for heavyweight champion Leon Spinks when a determined stranger showed up wanting to meet the fighter. The stranger claimed to be Sylvester Stallone, said he'd made a movie called Rocky, and insisted he really needed to congratulate the new champion. Mr. T had never heard of Rocky or Sylvester Stallone. To him, this was just another guy with a story trying to talk his way past security. So he did what he was paid to do. He blocked the door and said no. Stallone tried to explain who he was and how important the meeting would be, but Mr. T wasn't budging. His job was to protect Leon Spinks, not worry about hurting some stranger's feelings. The conversation got heated, with Stallone insisting he was somebody important, and Mr. T making it clear that he didn't care who this guy thought he was. Years later, when Stallone was developing Rocky III, he remembered that encounter with the intimidating bodyguard who couldn't be pushed around. He needed an antagonist who could believably threaten Rocky Balboa, someone who looked like he could actually hurt the Italian stallion in the ring. More importantly, he needed someone with that special quality that made audiences believe he was truly dangerous. When Stallone's people tracked down Mr. T and offered him the role of Clubber Lang, it seemed like a perfect match. But Mr. T's transition from bodyguard to movie star wasn't as smooth as anyone expected. He had no formal training, no experience on movie sets, and no understanding of how the film industry worked. Stallone had mapped out every punch, every movement, and every camera angle with military precision. He needed the actors to hit their marks exactly so the fights would look convincing without anyone getting seriously injured. Mr. T understood the safety requirements, but he felt that some of the choreography made Clubber Lang look weak or hesitant. During one particularly intense training scene, Mr. T stopped in the middle of a take and told Stallone directly that Clubber wouldn't move that way. He demonstrated what he thought the character would do instead, throwing punches with a different rhythm and a more aggressive stance. His suggestions were actually good from a character perspective, but they completely disrupted Stallone's carefully planned choreography. Stallone found himself caught between respecting Mr. T's natural instincts and maintaining control over his own movie. He knew that Mr. T's authentic screen presence was one of the film's biggest assets, but he also couldn't let an inexperienced actor take over the directing process. The conversation that followed was tense and professional, with both men trying to find a way forward. The solution involved more rehearsal time and detailed discussions about each scene before filming began. Stallone would explain his overall vision for the sequence, and Mr. T would offer suggestions for how Clubber might react differently. Sometimes they filmed multiple versions of the same scene to see which approach worked better in the editing room. This collaborative process improved the final product, but it also slowed down production and increased the film's budget significantly. Other actors on set noticed that Mr. T was getting more input into his scenes than most newcomers would ever expect. Some saw it as Stallone recognizing genuine talent, while others wondered if the director was losing control of his own movie. Stallone expected to be the primary focus of interviews and publicity events, just as he had been for the previous Rocky films. But reporters and audiences were fascinated by Mr. T's larger-than-life personality and his memorable catchphrases that were already becoming part of popular culture. Interview segments that were supposed to focus on Stallone's return as Rocky often became dominated by Mr. T's colorful responses to questions. Entertainment shows wanted to hear Mr. T talk about his background, his philosophy, and his predictions for upcoming fights. Meanwhile, Stallone found himself pushed to the side, discussing technical filmmaking details while his villain stole the spotlight. This shift in media attention was deeply frustrating for Stallone, who had poured years of his life into developing the Rocky character and building the franchise from nothing. Seeing his own villain get more coverage than the hero felt like losing control of his own creation. When Rocky III became a massive box office success, it validated both men's approaches to the project, but it also established a permanent tension in their relationship. Stallone learned that sometimes the best creative ideas come from unexpected sources, even when they complicate the filmmaking process. Mr. T learned that Hollywood success requires balancing personal vision with professional collaboration. The next conflict would come from an unexpected source, a female co-star who thought she could change the rules of the game. Melinda Koula. When the A-Team was being developed for television, the creators knew they needed to add some variety to their all-male team of military misfits. Television in the early 1980s was still struggling with how to write strong female characters, especially in action shows dominated by masculine themes and traditional gender roles. Their solution was to create Amy Amanda Allen, played by Melinda Koula, a newspaper reporter who would help the team and provide a different perspective. Koula came to the show with serious acting credentials. She was classically trained with extensive theater experience and had genuine dramatic aspirations beyond television work. She saw the A-Team as a stepping stone to more substantial roles in film and serious drama, not as the defining moment of her career or her ultimate destination as a performer. From the very beginning, Koula had significant concerns about how her character was being written and how women were generally portrayed on the show. She felt that Amy was too often reduced to being the token female character who needed rescuing or who served primarily as emotional support for the men. She wanted more substantial storylines and more active participation in the team's actual missions. Mr. T, meanwhile, was still adjusting to the world of television production and learning the basics of working with scripts, hitting his marks, and developing chemistry with his co-stars. His approach to the work was straightforward and instinctive. He focused on making B.A. Baracus feels real and authentic by drawing on his own experiences and personality rather than formal acting techniques. The problem started when Koula began pushing aggressively for changes to her character and the show's scripts. She would spend time between takes meeting with writers and producers, trying to convince them to give Amy more meaningful storylines and a more active role in the team's operations. Her suggestions were often valid from a storytelling perspective, but they clashed with the show's established formula and the tight production schedule. Mr. T didn't understand why Koula seemed so unhappy with the success they were all experiencing together. The A-Team was a genuine hit show that was making everyone involved both famous and wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. From his practical perspective, they should all be grateful for the opportunity and focused on making the best show possible within the established format that was clearly working with audiences. Their different approaches to the work created noticeable tension on the set that affected everyone involved. Koula would spend considerable time discussing script changes and character development with writers and producers, often delaying filming while these creative meetings took place. Mr. T preferred to focus on perfecting his own performance and building solid working relationships with the crew members who made the show possible. He began to see her constant suggestions and script discussions as complaining rather than genuine creative collaboration. From his perspective, they had been given an incredible opportunity that most actors would kill for, and spending time complaining about the details instead of appreciating the bigger picture seemed ungrateful and counterproductive. The situation was made significantly worse by the show's demanding production schedule and the constant pressure to maintain high ratings in a competitive television landscape. Television production moves extremely fast, with very little time available for extensive rewrites or detailed character development discussions. When Koula pushed for script changes, it sometimes delayed filming or required last-minute adjustments that frustrated everyone involved in the production. Mr. T's reaction to these delays was typically direct and unfiltered. He believed strongly in showing up prepared, doing the work professionally, and moving efficiently to the next scene without unnecessary complications. When production was held up by script discussions or character development meetings, he would express his frustration openly and without diplomatic language. The breaking point came during the filming of the first season's final episodes. Koula had been pushing particularly hard for her character to have a more substantial and active role in a major action sequence that was central to the episode's plot. She wanted Amy to be directly involved in the team's dangerous mission rather than staying safely on the sidelines while the men handled all the real action. The writers and producers were actually willing to consider her suggestions and potentially incorporate some of her ideas, but the discussions required time and extensive script revisions that pushed the production schedule to its limits. During one of these production delays, Mr. T made pointed comments about how some people couldn't just be satisfied with the incredible success they had been given. He didn't mention Koula by name during his complaints, but everyone on the set knew exactly who he was talking about and what situation had prompted his frustration. His words were quickly reported back to Koula by well-meaning crew members, and she was both hurt and angry about being characterized as ungrateful when she was simply trying to improve the show. The confrontation that followed wasn't a dramatic screaming match or an explosive blow-up that stopped production. Instead, it was a tense but professional conversation where both actors made their positions completely clear to each other and to anyone else who was listening. Koula explained that she was genuinely trying to make the show better and create opportunities for more diverse and interesting storytelling. Mr. T responded that they should be focusing on what was clearly working with audiences rather than trying to fix problems that didn't really exist. Neither of them was entirely wrong in their perspective, but their fundamentally different approaches to the work made it impossible to find any common ground or reach a satisfactory compromise. Carl Weathers. Carl Weathers brought serious boxing credentials and acting experience to the Rocky franchise. He had been a professional football player before transitioning to acting, and his portrayal of Apollo Creed in the first two Rocky films had established him as a legitimate action star with real athletic ability. When Mr. T joined Rocky III as Clubber Lang, Weathers initially saw him as just another celebrity stunt casting choice. The tension between them started during the film's early boxing training sessions. Weathers had worked extensively with professional boxing trainers and choreographers to develop Apollo Creed's fighting style. He understood the technical aspects of boxing and took pride in making his fight scenes look authentic and believable to audiences who knew the sport. Mr. T approached the boxing training with his characteristic intensity, but he had no formal boxing background beyond street fighting and general physical fitness. His fighting style was more about raw power and intimidation than technical precision and footwork. Weathers watched Mr. T's training sessions and made it clear that he didn't think this approach would work for a major motion picture. Weathers had suggestions for how the fight scenes should be choreographed based on his experience from the previous Rocky films. He felt that Mr. T's character needed more sophisticated boxing technique to be believable as a serious threat to Rocky Balboa, who had already faced skilled opponents like Apollo Creed. Mr. T disagreed with this assessment completely. He argued that Clubber Lang's strength came from his street fighting background and raw aggression, not from polished boxing technique. He felt that making Clubber too technically proficient would undermine the character's authenticity and his appeal to audiences who connected with his outsider status. The debate became heated when Weathers suggested that Mr. T should work with additional boxing trainers to improve his technique before filming the major fight scenes. Mr. T took this as a direct insult to his physical abilities and his understanding of his own character. He made it clear that he didn't need lessons from anyone about how to be intimidating or dangerous. Weathers responded that this was about creating believable action sequences for a major Hollywood film. He pointed out that audiences would notice if the boxing looked fake or poorly choreographed, and that could hurt the entire film's credibility. His concerns were legitimate from a technical standpoint, but they clashed with Mr. T's more instinctive approach. Weathers had developed a working relationship with Sylvester Stallone based on mutual respect for each other's athletic backgrounds and professional approach to the boxing choreography. He expected Mr. T to follow the established system that had worked successfully for the previous films. But Mr. T had his own ideas about how Clubber Lang should move and fight. During takes, he would sometimes deviate from the planned choreography to add moves or reactions that felt more natural to him. These improvisations often looked good on camera, but they disrupted the carefully planned sequence of moves that Weathers and Stallone had rehearsed. Weathers became increasingly frustrated with what he saw as Mr. T's unprofessional approach to the technical demands of filmmaking. He felt that Mr. T was being selfish by changing the choreography without consulting the other actors who had to react to his movements. The safety of everyone involved depended on following the planned sequences exactly. Mr. T saw Weathers' complaints as an attempt to control his performance and limit his creative input. He felt that his natural instincts were being dismissed in favor of overly technical approaches that would make his character less authentic and less exciting for audiences. The conflict represented a fundamental disagreement about how action scenes should be created. The success of the film validated both approaches to some degree, but it didn't resolve the personal conflict between the two actors. Weathers continued to work in the Rocky franchise and maintained his reputation as a serious actor with legitimate athletic credentials. Mr. T moved on to other projects, but never forgot what he saw as Weathers' attempts to undermine his authenticity and his right to interpret his own character. Even the nicest guys in Hollywood had their limits when it came to dealing with Mr. T's strong personality. Benedict. Dirk Benedict came to the A-Team with a reputation as one of Hollywood's most professional and easygoing actors. His success on Battlestar Galactica had established him as a reliable performer who could handle both action sequences and character development with equal skill. He was known for getting along well with cast and crew members, avoiding conflicts, and maintaining a positive atmosphere on set. When the A-Team began production, Benedict naturally fell into the role of mediator between his more volatile co-stars. He tried to smooth over the growing tensions between George Peppard and Mr. T, and later between Mr. T and other cast members. His diplomatic approach worked for a while, but the constant stress of managing other people's conflicts eventually wore him down. Benedict's problems with Mr. T started small, but grew over time. He noticed that Mr. T had very strong opinions about how scenes should be played, and wasn't shy about expressing those opinions during filming. While Benedict appreciated creative input, he felt that Mr. T sometimes pushed too hard for changes that weren't necessary, or that disrupted the show's established rhythm. The first serious disagreement came during the filming of a second season episode that featured extensive scenes between their two characters. Benedict had worked with the writers to develop some subtle character moments for Face that would show his growth and vulnerability beneath his smooth exterior. These scenes required careful timing and a delicate touch to work effectively. Mr. T felt that these character moments slowed down the episode's pace and took away from the action sequences that audiences really wanted to see. He suggested cutting or shortening several of Benedict's scenes to make room for more B.A. Baracus moments. His suggestions weren't necessarily wrong from a commercial standpoint, but they undermined the character development that Benedict had worked hard to create. Benedict tried to handle the situation diplomatically, explaining why these character moments were important for the show's long-term development and for maintaining audience interest beyond just action sequences. He pointed out that successful shows needed both exciting action and genuine character growth to keep viewers engaged season after season. Mr. T remained unconvinced by these arguments. He felt that Benedict was overthinking the show's requirements and that audiences were tuning in primarily for exciting action and memorable characters, not for subtle dramatic moments that might work better in a different type of show. The debate continued for several days and affected the filming schedule. The breaking point came when Mr. T made comments about some actors caring more about their own screen time than about making the best show possible. Benedict had always prided himself on being a team player who put the show's success ahead of his personal interests. Being characterized as selfish or ego-driven was particularly insulting to someone who had spent considerable time and energy trying to help his co-stars work together effectively. After this confrontation, Benedict stopped trying to mediate between Mr. T and other cast members. He focused on his own performance and his own scenes while avoiding involvement in conflicts that he couldn't resolve. This change in approach actually improved his own work on the show, but it also meant that tensions between other cast members escalated without his stabilizing influence. The final conflict would come from one of Hollywood's most respected dramatic actors, James Caan. James Caan brought serious dramatic credentials and method acting training to his brief collaboration with Mr. T on a television movie project in the mid-1980s. Caan was known for his intense preparation methods and his ability to disappear completely into characters through extensive research and psychological preparation. His approach to acting was the complete opposite of Mr. T's instinctive, personality-based style. The project paired them as unlikely partners in a crime drama that was supposed to showcase both actors' strengths while creating an interesting dynamic between their different backgrounds and acting styles. Caan saw the collaboration as an opportunity to work with someone who had genuine street credibility and could bring authenticity to action sequences. The problems started during the first script reading sessions. Caan had spent weeks preparing for his role, developing a detailed backstory for his character and researching similar real-life situations to inform his performance. He expected his co-star to approach the work with similar intensity and preparation, but Mr. T's method was much more straightforward and immediate. Mr. T read through the script, understood his character's motivations and objectives, and was ready to start filming without extensive preparation or analysis. His approach was based on finding the authentic emotions within himself that matched what the character was experiencing, then expressing those emotions naturally in front of the camera. Khan found this approach frustrating and unprofessional. He felt that Mr. T wasn't taking the work seriously enough or putting in the effort necessary to create a truly compelling performance. During rehearsals, he would suggest different approaches to scenes and different ways of interpreting the character's psychology. Mr. T responded that he understood his character perfectly well, without needing to analyze every motivation or create elaborate backstories. He felt that Khan was overcomplicating what should be a straightforward performance and was trying to impose his own acting methods on someone who worked differently but equally effectively. The tension escalated during the filming of dramatic scenes that required both actors to work closely together. Khan would use method acting techniques to get into character, sometimes staying in character between takes to maintain the emotional authenticity of his performance. He expected Mr. T to match this level of intensity and commitment. Mr. T found Khan's approach artificial and unnecessary. He could access the required emotions when the cameras were rolling without needing to maintain them constantly throughout the day. He felt that Khan's method acting was more about showing off his training than about creating better performances for the audience. The conflict came to a head when Khan made comments about the difference between real acting and mere personality projection. He suggested that some performers relied too heavily on their natural charisma instead of developing genuine acting skills through training and study. While he didn't mention Mr. T by name, everyone on the set understood who he was referring to. Mr. T's response was characteristically direct. He pointed out that his performances connected with audiences in ways that many trained actors envied, and that authenticity was more important than technique for creating memorable characters. He suggested that some actors got so caught up in their methods that they forgot about entertaining the people who were actually watching. The remainder of the production was completed professionally, but without any warmth between the two leads. Khan continued to use his method acting approach while Mr. T stuck to his instinctive style. The final product showed both approaches working effectively, but the personal relationship between the actors never recovered from their fundamental disagreement about the craft of acting. Mr. T's conflicts with these 6 actors reveal a pattern that defined his entire Hollywood career. He was someone who refused to back down when he felt disrespected. Whether the challenge came from established veterans who questioned his credentials or from co-stars who tried to control his creative choices. What do you think about Mr. T's approach to these Hollywood conflicts? Was he right to stand his ground, or should he have been more willing to compromise? Share your thoughts about these explosive behind-the-scenes battles that shaped one of entertainment's most memorable careers.